Well, I'm continuing my conversation with this fascinating and illuminated, cultured, great conversationalist, this Julia here, and here she is. Julia, you were telling me about the people that are buried here. You love. Well, first of all, tell me you love being the custodian of here of this of this. Why do you like it?
Well, I've been finding it's a marvelous sociological study, working with all of the information that one can find about the burials. We've only got of the half of the burials still have tombs. The others are lost.
Oh, really?
And but we've got the archives written in beautiful French on lovely rag paper in fine handwriting, which gives all the details. For the Swiss, it gives even the mother's maiden name of the deceased person.
Oh, really?
So you can do the female genealogies as well. And it gives the cantons, it gives the professions, and so on. And
you were telling me you even have a slave that's buried here.
That's right. That's Nadezhda. She's baptized in the Russian Orthodox family with a name which means hope. And Nadia, Nadezhda. And we don't have a portrait of her, but we have this beautiful marble tomb that they made for her. Her freedom was bought by Rossellini's uncle. Rossellini and Champollion went to Egypt and Nubia and brought her back from Nubia. And we have serfs, we have servants, we have a Croatian deserter.
Really?
The Swiss would bury foreigners who had no money for free, as a way of winning the respect of the Catholic Italians. It was for the burial place for all of those who were not able to be buried in Catholic cemeteries.
Oh.
Before 1828, if you were not Catholic or Jewish, you would be taken by ox cart without refrigeration to Livorno for burial. So this opens in 1828 with the Swiss owning the land.
The cemetery opened in 1828.
Yes, the English gave the most money for it. And then it was closed in 1877, so it's just in use for 50 years. But it's the 50 years of the Italian Risorgimento. So many of our people, like there's an American named Pratt, who was fighting alongside of Garibaldi and so forth. We have babies.
An American was fighting
here.
alongside Garibaldi?
Yes, we have babies buried here who are named Garibaldi. One of them is Hungarian and one of them is Italian. It's fascinating to study the medical history of this cemetery because it's malaria, it's TB, it's tetanus, even anthrax. I was a bit nervous about making that burial, and I've given a lecture at Santa Maria Nuova on Sara Parker Raymond. She's actually buried in the Protestant cemetery in Rome, and I found the entry there for the scholars who were looking for her. She was a black abolitionist and a friend of Frederick Douglass, who also had visited here.
Oh, in fact,
May the 11th.
Yes. There's a plaque there.
That was sculpted by Daniel, who is Roman, whose family had been slaves. And Sara Parker Raymond was lecturing in England as well as America against slavery. And then in London she studied at All Saints, you remember, Call the Midwife stuff. And Mazzini wrote a letter for her to come here and study medicine at Santa Maria Nuova. And in 1868, this black woman, Sara Parker Raymond, became MD, which was absolutely impossible for women in the 90s. Yes. And it was marvellous giving the lecture in situ where she had studied. And she was part of the women were much more clean about washing hands. The men would come in and deliver babies without washing their hands. So many of our mothers buried here die following childbirth from puerperal fever. But she's part of the movement that was insisting on the importance of hygiene. And we've also got Gamgee and Lister, various families that were involved in that movement, as well as, you remember, we had...
Lister, you mean that are buried here?
They're buried here, but we also have other people who are not buried here. There was an Italian who observed that the women tending women in childbirth who were cleaner, the patients survived. And now we're going through this whole business with the coronavirus and learning to wash our hands.
Yes, yes, yes. And
It's
they knew
so
it back then,
important.
huh?
Yeah.
They knew it back then.
Yes.
Back then. Mm. So you were saying earlier, you what do you have a particular writer or poet that you love more than others?
A particular
Poet or writer that you prefer?
one of them that I love is Apuleius, the Golden Ass. He's African, and he writes marvelous stories where he has the central character who's really rather stupid and gets involved with magic, turns himself into a donkey and sees the world from the donkey's perspective, the injustice
How
of slavery and so
interesting!
forth.
How interesting!
And then finally is able to eat roses and become himself, his real self, a sadder and wiser self. And it's a story that sort of reverberates throughout world literature. It's Don Bernal.
Yeah. Earlier you had told me you had explained that you had gone to America, studied there, got your PhD. You were a professor at Princeton. What did your father do? He was
a journalist and a writer, and his first book was his biography of Gandhi, who was his friend. And while Gandhi was still in prison, and the title is The Tragedy of Gandhi.
And was your father's name?
John Robert Gloney Bolton, and was Anglo-Irish, and he spent several years in Bombay as an editor for the Times of India. He was on the Salt March. And,
he was. Yes. He was on the Salt March.
And was a wonderful BBC broadcast where it was Nehru, Lord Irwin, and my father and other people. And my father describes being on the Salt March and how it was history very quietly being made.
History very quietly being made. Lovely phrase.
And he also describes Gandhi's boyish laughter. And,
his boyish laughter, yeah.
And he also wrote a biography on Pope John the 23rd, who was also his friend. And
that was the what did they got
and Pope John 23rd was wonderful. That when he went and visited the prisoners at Regina Caeli prison, he's very like Francis, actually living the gospel instead of the church hierarchy. And why I can be Catholic. And he was Mazaric's speechwriter when the Czech government was in exile during the war in London.
Oh, really?
And he wrote a book on Masaryk and Benish and so forth. And I can remember being a child in the embassy, in the Czech embassy during the war.
Oh, you can.
And he was a wonderful father. He believed in taking children. He took me and my children to Greece on a Turkish boat amongst the islands in storms.
My God, your story is like one of those English period films of. You've quite a fascinating story you have.
Well, it's fascinating but sad because there were these
It's also sad.
From my mother was quite different from my father. My father was, loving and kind. My mother was, she was the granddaughter of a very, very wealthy but fine person. Sir James Roberts grew up in Haworth. Patrick Bronte was his teacher until he was 11 years old. And then he walked barefoot across the moors to work in the mills. And at 18 he became manager. He taught himself fluent Russian. And he would do trade with cloth and wool between St. Petersburg and Yorkshire. And he eventually owned Saltaire, which was a model mill town, It's beautiful, with stone houses for all the workers, museum, church, hospital. Everything is ideal. In a country valley, so instead of the slums of Bradford where everyone was dying of diseases, here they were healthy. And it's a canal, a riverboat, a river, and a railroad. So in the countryside.
So you're a woman of a great social conscience.
Yeah, because the State of England novels like Disraeli's Sybil and Charlotte Bronte's Shirley are all about this movement of the social classes to have, and also I'm a companion of the Guild of St George of John Ruskin.
Yes.
He was advocating that the factory girls read Aurora Leigh by Elizabeth Barrett Browning, because in it she's describing the education of a poor gypsy girl finding the world of books and so forth. And this
Gosh,
is what I've been
wish
doing with the Roma, is recording their stories, which are wonderful. They're huge oral library of stories, which we don't credit them with.
So you restored this cemetery through your efforts, through the help from these Roma whom you recruited.
Yes, I couldn't have done it without them.
Yes.
They had absolutely right. I don't need to tell them what to do. They've already thought it through.
Isn't that
and
amazing?
done it.
Well,
it makes everything so frictionless and so excellent.
I in Rome where I live, and I know some of the Roma, and I speak to them, I know their names, and I chat with them, and of course I have some sympathy for them, because I remember growing up in Texas, us Mexicans in Texas, we were looked upon like the people look at Roma today. In fact, we look similar even physically. And when people are poor and destitute and have no education, it is a receptacle of people's biases and fears, isn't it?
But they can also, in the right atmosphere, be absolute sponges of it all. And what I've said to them is, have two cultures. Don't give up your own. Learn ours, but always keep yours.
Yes. Good idea.
They must have their own identity. It mustn't be taken from them. And social assistance has been saying that our Roma mother, she must dress in black trousers. Roma women will never dress in black or in trousers. It's to completely strip them of their meaning. And they don't realize how violating that is.
Yes. Why do you think, I've often thought that I reflect a lot on peoples and cultures and changes and things, and why do you think that the Roma, sometimes I think they're only people who did not manage over time to in a materialistic sense to progress and...
Well, they see our progress as evil.
Oh, they do?
Yeah. They see our marriages with the divorces, the cruelty to our children. They do not allow their babies to cry. And this is wonderful, because putting the baby in a separate room to cry its lungs out damages its brain.
Yes.
And they, for instance, I was giving them children's copies of Dante's Commedia, and they said, no, we mustn't let the children see the cruelty of the Inferno. They really feel it's important to raise a child without violence, without cruelty in the first years. It's going to have to live with that from the Gaggi for years after, but it's got to have the strength first. And I'm really worried about them, because I see that they are preserving at tremendous cost really important values that they could be teaching us.
Tell me something, do you think that humanity in general progresses and gets better over time? No, you don't think so? Notwithstanding all the materialism, the more access to materialism, more access to healthcare, etc., etc.
I find myself absolutely miserable when I'm walking around in a shopping mall. I feel the misery of all of the people in the sweatshops making the clothing. That's why I sew my own clothes. And I love our discussions we have together with the Roma, because we all agree money is like poison. It really causes so much hurt and harm, and We just need enough to survive, not more.
Yes, yes,
We
yes.
don't need. This house has accumulated. I'm afraid it's accumulated.
Tell me something.
books.
What about in your personal life? What were the saddest periods of your life?
I'm
The
sorry, I
saddest
repeat.
the saddest periods of your life.
I think losing my convent.
Losing
That
your
was-
convent.
And then.
What was that all about?
Well, realizing that there is evil in the places of goodness, and that was worse actually than my marriage breaking up.
Was that difficult? The breakup
Yeah.
of the marriage?
Oh yes. I mean, I'd really vowed to be married until the bitter end.
Yes.
And being told, no, you have to think of yourself as a widow. It's too dangerous. And it was divorce from extreme mental and physical cruelty. And I always, because I gave him everything. 3 sons.
Well,
a
you know,
car, a house,
relationships
the
unfortunately
PhD,
change.
and so forth.
Oh, really? Yes.
But no thanks.
Yeah.
I mean, the last thing he said on the phone before he died was, "You are the most evil thing in the whole universe."
Oh my God. Oh my God.
That's hard to live
Well,
with.
you know, people, the time when people get the most irrational and violent and destructive is with the people they're most intimate with, isn't it?
Right.
I mean, most violence is
Yes.
domestic violence,
It's
for
a
example.
mirroring.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
And also, I think that I see this also in Elizabeth and Robert's marriage.
In Elizabeth
there's
Barrett
jealousy.
Browning
Yeah,
and Robert
there's
Barrett.
jealousy.
Yes. Tell me about that. Tell me.
Well, in the sense, it's rather obvious, certainly from the way he buries her. He never comes back to her tomb, and he Leighton offers to do the very beautiful tomb. And Robert has buried her hugger-mugger over in a corner, so Leighton says, no, you must put her in a more obvious place. And Robert writes to Isa Blagden saying, you mustn't let anyone know this, you know, I so hate that gravedigger. I know this gravedigger from all of the documents in the archives. It gets into Nathaniel Hawthorne's marble faun. And Robert gets into Nathaniel Hawthorne's marble faun as Donatello.
Oh,
who's
really?
terrified
Oh,
of
my God.
gravediggers and so on and so forth.
As you were
but-
saying, there's an incredible wealth of
Yes.
literature and stories and
Yes,
and
yes.
drama here in this cemetery.
Right, it's amazing.
It's a universe.
And what's been lovely is collecting the books by and about the people here, and documents and so forth. And everything sort of comes without being paid for.
Yes.
It's a labour of love that many people are participating in. And actually, there's a whole another library upstairs.
Oh, there's another library upstairs.
That's the Italian one.
That's the
with
Italian one.
with all of
Well,
the Dante
just to
and
give
so
you an
forth.
idea of the kinds of books. There's another one upstairs. Hey, what are these books here? Where are they
Well,
from?
it begins with the alphabet and the Bible.
Yes.
The Bible in all of the different languages, the original languages,
Really?
and our translations, including Romansh, because we have quite a few Romansh families from the Grigioni in Switzerland here. And then it goes into theology, then it goes into the women in the monastic orders, contemplatives. I work especially with Julian of Norwich, who was an anchoress in England in the Middle Ages. And I've edited all of her manuscripts. And I did that when I was in the convent, and then later, and published. That book is huge. And then it's world literature, then it's English literature, well, Welsh, Irish, Icelandic, and so forth. These books here are the people buried here. Then I've got a whole section of the library which is on nomadic and indigenous peoples subjected to poverty and discrimination.
Oh, really?
By the
Nomadic and
dominant.
indigenous
And
people.
so that includes Aborigine, Gypsy, also includes Jews and women, and all of the outsiders who
Well, you could have included us Mexicans in Texas.
Yes,
We went through a
right.
bit.
And I'll never forget in Mexico when I was visiting there when I was 16, 17, you could see the social classes
Yeah.
in the bus station. The sort of more Spanish standing very arrogantly in a circle, and then the wetbacks with
The Indians, yes, yes.
Cervantes
There's a
and
great
so forth.
division, a class division in Mexico, which is
Yes.
terrible, very terrible. But you know,
But
in Texas
then you
we.
have wonderful like Sor Juana de la Cruz.
Oh, yes, yes.
She's marvelous.
Yes,
But
yes,
they
yes.
took away all her books.
Oh, really?
And
Yes.
she just died
Oh,
because her scholarship was her identity, and they robbed her of it.
yeah, yes. Well, you know, the funny thing is, our experience, us Texas Mexicans, we, I remember as a child that we went through a lot of discrimination and racism. And the funny
Yes.
thing is, that was our land, and now they
Yes.
consider us the immigrants. Isn't
Yeah,
isn't
well,
that isn't that the
when
damnedest
I
thing?
went to California, I was very aware this is Spanish land, and before that it was Indian, and so there I was, a 16-year-old freshman, taking intensive Spanish, and I can't speak it now because I get it all mixed up with Italian, but that was my third language, well, fourth, because I'd had French and Latin and then Spanish, and then did Italian later. But I can remember really seeing the lovely adobe houses. There were only two left in San Juan Bautista and San Jose, but they were so beautiful. And Monterey, that to me as a European coming to California was the way I also feel when I'm in New Mexico. And when I was teaching at Boulder, I was the Hispanic students faculty advisor, because 10 years before they had car bombed 2 cars full of penitentiary students and killed them to get them to not come to the university. And then 10 years later they had the courage to come back, and we knew this story, and it was an awful time because the English only movement was going on, and I can remember telephoning people, and the ones who were saying no, English only were the ones who came from other language backgrounds and felt they had to drop all of their past.
Well, there's a lot of injustice in the world, and I suppose there's also a lot of beauty and positiveness. And speaking of which, tell me a little bit about English culture, English literature. What a glorious and great civilization, great culture, great people. It's their contributions have been.
Now we're losing it. What was wonderful was the Olympic Games. Do you remember they based it on Blake?
Oh, they did. No,
yes,
I don't remember that.
And they had this wonderful scene of all of the children in the Great Ormond Street Hospital in their cribs. You know, that was Wendy and Peter Pan and so on. They were dealing with literature.
Yeah.
And they also had one scene of the Queen and James Bond, but they were playing the games with the New Jerusalem and so forth. Because literature for children who are traumatized is an escape, and I think that's the reason why I really wanted to study history rather than literature, because in history, but even so, history is a bit mythical. It tells the story obliquely. It doesn't tell the true story. But for instance, Dante and Dante's son, Pietro Alighieri, are very clear in the Commedia. This is a fiction, this is a dream, but it's a dream that can teach you. And you become Dante, you make the mistakes, and you learn from the mistakes, just as you do with Pinocchio. So I'm seeing the importance of literature not as a romantic escape, but as pedagogy for ethics. And when I listen to the stories that Diamanta tells and I record, they're all about ethics. The young girl who is kind to the animals will receive help from them when she's in a crisis. The other sister who is cruel will not get any help and will get into difficulties. That you shape the world by how you behave.
Are you hopeful for the future of mankind?
Yes and no. And I don't believe in progress.
You don't
I
believe
think
in
that's
progress?
a myth.
It's a myth.
But I do believe.
And yet, with all this this
Yeah.
increase in materialism and
No,
all
the
this stuff,
materialism doesn't work.
Yeah,
It's
what's lacking in the world is values. Isn't it?
yes, and those are the most important things of all.
Yeah.
And I mean, I've loved those moments. I grew up in the war, not able to read until I was 8 years old because I was sort of an abandoned child, the servants looking after us, parents doing doing war work. And but there was a newspaper with the cartoons against the Germans, and the Germans were these monsters. You know, they were cartoon figures that were not real at all.
The way
They
the
were
Americans
they
are
were
trying to depict the
they
Chinese
were the
now.
images of your nightmares.
Yes.
And so when the German prisoners of war were mending the street outside my house when I was this child, I was so shocked that they were human beings like
Yes.
myself,
Yes.
that I went and stole the family sweet ration to give to them.
Yes.
And
Really?
But those, which is a bit like
Yes.
Mark Twain's, Huck Finn and so forth.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
saving the slave and so on.
Yes.
But those moments when you overcome a terrible prejudice that you've been educated into with images and so forth, it's glorious. But you also feel terribly guilty because it seems to be illegal. The last chapter in one of my books, it's an essays on women in the Middle Ages.
Tell me about the books you've written.
Well, that chapter is titled Holy Disobedience, which is like John Lewis's Good Trouble. I think we need to allow children to. I mean, this came out very strongly in the Nuremberg trials.
Oh.
That one should not be obedient to evil.
Yes. But social man always ends up obeying the leader, even when the leader promotes destructive evil things. Often is the case,
Right,
isn't it?
which is what Dante and Brunetto are teaching against. That if you have an evil leader, you do the Sicilian Vespers against him. Charles of Anjou they're writing about was a kind of Trump. And so they don't kill him, but they do take his power away from him because he's bleeding the people white in Sicily with taxes to do an armada against a crusade against Christian Constantinople. And everyone secretly says no. The Emperor of Constantinople, the popes, the Genoese, the Aragonese, they all get together, Brunetto and Gianni di Procida, disguised as Franciscans, visit all of them. And they even have the chutzpah to go to Kaladasha to raise money from him for the crusade against him. Which just amazes me because they show him how stupid he was, and they write about it, and I've got the manuscripts. I've read the manuscripts on this.
Really.
But
So here in this library, you have what is the oldest book or manuscript you have here?
That's hard to say. I do have a few manuscript leaves, but I don't think it's important really. There are some very fine, well, for instance you'll see here, there's some fine editions of the Elizabeth Barrett Browning poetry and so forth.
Yes.
We've got quite a lot of very good rare books which just have come to us. But the rare books which I find most interesting are probably the worst books. For instance, this one is in dreadful paper, in Old St. James, and it's about slavery in Jamaica. This is Elizabeth Barrett Browning's family.
Oh, really?
And this is the Book of Slaves describing them.
Oh my God, how
And
incredible.
this was given to me by a member of the Barrett family.
Is that right?
And I made the cover to protect it because it's so
Incredible.
fragile.
Oh my God. And when was this book written? This one
This
here?
is written in the early 20th century. The date is 1912. Yes. And but this is what I've loved, is that the books have come in situ, into the place where they make most sense, they're most intense, and which I think is what scholarship should be, and then the sharing of it. So I've done a lot of work on the web with essays. I've catalogued all of the tombs, I've catalogued all of the books, I've edited Julian, put that on the web. I've edited Brunetto and put that on the web. I have Dante with readings by an actor from the Mugello whose accent is better than Benini's, who was the son of Contadini, and we were doing it as his therapy while he was dying.
Yeah.
And I've got the Società Dantesca readings by the scholars, which are very blah, whereas Carlo reads it Cantastorie, and which is the way the contadini recite Dante, and they love
Do you
it.
think that the greatest work in Italian literature is Dante?
Yes.
Yes. Why? Why is he the greatest?
It's amazing. He had access to all of the great classics, Latin classics and so forth. And he plays off them. He imagines himself falling asleep over Virgil's Aeneid. So Virgil appears and is his guide, taking him down into the book 6 of the Aeneid, which is hell. And then they come to Purgatory, where Virgil no longer knows his way, and so they have to climb the mountain, getting help from everyone else. And then Beatrice takes over, and Beatrice Portinari, the daughter of the rich banker, who builds Santa Maria Nuova Hospital, which is still existing 700 years later.
Interesting.
Where I lectured on Sara Parker Raymond. And this wonderful flight through the space flight through the planets to God, and looking down on the Earth, which is as the Apollo saw it, this small marble.
Yeah.
And
do you think that God is real? Is there a God?
I think he's us.
You think he's us?
I think we as human beings, each of us have God in us.
Yes, beautiful. I like this.
And that's why in Quakerism you can't have capital punishment, and you are against war, because why kill that of God in another?
Yes.
And
yes. I think all wars have been wars of choice, perhaps almost all of
Cain
them.
and Abel. It's jealousy.
Yes.
It's
yes.
fear.
And again, leaders who with their hubris and ego convinced people to send their young people to die in wars, which man is very good at justifying things that are unjustifiable. Isn't that the case? And so to send your young people for patriotism or nationalism, your children to die in foreign wars is a pretty stupid thing. Yeah.
Yes. No, I found it very hard at Princeton with. If a student came to me asking me to write a letter for him to go into the Marines, and I'd get the form saying, would you accept this young man fighting to save your family? And I wrote back, I would not ever want one of my students to lose his life to save my family.
Beautiful answer.
But you can't do that to a student who wants. The student said, "It's all right. I decided not to go into the Marines." But I lost sleep over that one.
I think about yes, man's unwise choices and how we justify things, and how we man has an incredible capacity to justify things that are the unjustifiable through clever use of words and things, sentences and phrases which sound reasonable or acceptable, which are not, of course.
Which is what Brunetto was teaching against. He was showing, for instance, Ulysses' speech, you were not born to live as beasts,
Ooh, how beautiful.
That comes from Caterline's speech in Lucan, and it's a suicide speech.
Oh, really?
And everyone thinks, oh, this is wonderful, this is the Renaissance.
Yes, yes, yes.
It's not, it's false rhetoric. It's leading Ulysses and his men to shipwreck and death. It's a false journey. And so forth. And I wish we could bring that more into our teaching of young people. It was critical thinking, but I think critical thinking gets, as a label, and it's not really critical.
Well. The biggest problem, I guess, in our world today is the paucity of values and the fact that materialism, capitalism, consumerism, these things are como se dice, ci allontanano. They take us away from, they distance us from values, don't they?
Yes.
I'm not so sure they destroy them, but they certainly take us away from those.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, your Mexican background.
My Mexican background. Well, Mexican background, very poor background, Texas, in El Paso.
Yes.
And from an extremely poor family. And as I said, my mother did that job that, how shall we describe it in literary terms, that which women have done throughout history to save themselves.
There were so many moments in my life of when I was losing my battle, and I won it in the end, but I was thinking of myself as a shopping bag lady. Right? And I think that's one of the reasons I became Catholic, because I saw the shopping bag ladies in Westminster Cathedral could go up to the altar rail.
Oh, you became a Catholic. I didn't know this. Yes. Which is not a big jump from Anglican to Catholic, is it? They're very similar, aren't they?
Yeah. I did lose several times in my life everything.
Oh, really?
And it always comes back.
Yes, me too, by the way.
You don't need to buy it back.
Me too. Several times I've lost everything.
Yes. And it's wonderfully freeing.
Yes.
When you do that, you realise you don't rely on things.
Yes.
They're useful as instruments.
Well, now in my period of life now, I'm a minimalist. I live on very little money. I have nothing, but I have no debt, and so I'm totally free. And it's a beautiful thing. I wouldn't trade it for anything.
Yes, I had to get out of debt to go into the convent.
Oh, really?
You can't go into the convent with debts.
Oh, really? I didn't know this.
And that was a very freeing
Interesting.
But it meant after 4 years that I had nothing when I left.
Yes. So I've got plenty of nothing. Nothing's got plenty for me.
So I decided, well, if I was going to be miserable, I may as well be miserable in a place I love. So I came and lived in one unheated room for 4 years up in Montebeni as a hermit. And then,
really?
And then was given
as a hermit. Yes.
And then was given this. But it was the one thing I didn't give up were the books. And I used the last of my life savings to bring the books first from California, Illinois, New Jersey, Colorado, England, Florence.
Yes. Well, I must say, in my pursuit of minimalism and freedom, I even got rid of the books. I gave away a lot and threw a lot, actually, but they were not prized books like you have here. They were not rare books, but there's something extremely beautiful and wonderful about a book, isn't it? Yes.
And what I've loved too is creating books. And
you've written books.
I've written books, and
tell me about the books that you.
But I've also typeset them, designed them. I wrote for this one at Oxford when I signed the contract. Said the cover is non-negotiable.
Oh.
It has to be Michelangelo's Aurora, not the sappy, sick room, sentimental thing that normally they use for Elizabeth.
Right.
But her strong political
Well,
stuff.
you have very precise ideas and things and about everything, and it's all your ideas and notions are tied to some labyrinth of history and multi-dimensional. No.
Yes, I do think we've got a nice phrase in manuscript studies, palimpsest, where a manuscript has been written with a
Yes,
text,
yes.
and then they've scraped it off and written another text on it because
Right,
parchment
right,
is so
right,
expensive.
right.
So you get these multi-layers, hypertext, and that's what I do on the web with the Dante. I think you should look at it. It's called Dante Viva.
Dante Vivo.
And Living Dante.
Sì,
And
sì,
what
sì.
I've done there, I've got the text and I've got the audio readings, and you can hear it as you see it.
Yes.
And I've also recorded it in English, and you can hear it in English as you read it in Italian. It's much better than parallel text.
Oh, how
Your brain
interesting.
processes it wonderfully.
Most interesting.
And I've also put with that the manuscript illuminations, the Botticelli and Blake drawings, and then where he mentions music,
Yes.
I had a group of Italian musicologists and musicisti perform it from the manuscripts of the period.
Fascinating.
2-hour
Speaking of
concert.
music, what about your music likes and desire?
And remember, I lip read. What was the question?
Oh yes. What about your love of music? What kind of music do you like?
Well, being deaf is hard to love music.
Oh, you're
I'm
deaf?
hearing impaired.
Oh, you're hearing impaired.
And from a V2 rocket.
Oh, from a V2 rocket.
But I love medieval music, and yes. But a lot of.
Do you like Vivaldi, perchance? I think that's my favorite.
Yes.
Yeah, all things considered.
I like Albinoni. I like
Albinoni, see.
And but also. I'm trying to remember the name. Telemann, so forth.
Telemann, yes,
Yeah.
yes, Telemann. I like that period of music. I like that music. Yes, it's very nice.
But I'm not. I mean, I have to rely on others for music. I can't sing.
Yeah,
They say I've got a good voice, but I can't. I get the pitches all wrong
yes.
from not hearing them.